Welcome to the OBR Streaming Network. This is a brand new edition of The React. My name is Brad Ward. The man next to me is the always fantastic Pete Smith. Follow him on Twitter at _Pete Smith _. Good to see you filing in tonight. It's a special night. We've got a giveaway to talk about here in a few minutes that we're very excited about at the OBR. And we've got Thursday night football this week as the Browns will host the Steelers in what could be, Pete, a wind gust 33 up to 33 miles per hour. I just saw. Feels going to be a little chilly and maybe some flurries even up at the stadium. So what are your thoughts on the Steelers? 8-2. They kicked 6 field goals to beat the Ravens, coming here to face the Browns in their first primetime game of the year.
Yeah, I mean, if the weather is like that, you're going to be on the ground a lot, which isn't ideal for the Browns. The Steelers have been fortunate that they've been able to stay relatively healthy, particularly on the lines of scrimmage. Obviously, their rookie Fatnu is out for the year, but like they've got a lot of guys filling in. They've got a couple rookies who are playing pretty well. And the Browns are obviously very limited on the offensive line. The DeJuan Jones injury couldn't have come at a worse time. Coming short turnaround, Jed Wills is out, so you're Jermaine Ifedi, and you just signed Jaron Christian. So hopefully, Nick Chubb, who keeps saying he's feeling better and better, we'll see. But it's going to be a tough game. And the thing that I think worries me the most is special teams. The Steelers are really good, particularly at blocking punts. And that is a concern for a unit that has not done great this year for the Browns, and a kicking game that has not played particularly well this year. So it could be a slog. I think one of the benefits the Browns have, though, is that the Steelers have been really bad in the red zone. Now, that may not matter in this sort of game if it's just sort of slamming into each other back and forth in a game that looks like it's out of the 50s. But still, that part of it could work to the Browns' favor if they can throw the ball. The thing that sort of frustrates you is with the weather is like the best thing going for the Browns right now is their wide receivers. So does that invalidate them? But the other side of it is George Pickens has been a huge problem for the Browns. That sort of might limit what he can do. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. The short turnaround, they just played the Ravens. That's always a physical football game. They might be feeling it a little bit. The Browns are feeling it by virtue of the fact that they've been just beat up all year. It's in Cleveland. It's a divisional game. These games always get weird. And it's Thursday, so it's probably going to be awful football for certain respects, but that could work for the Browns' favor. And Kevin Stefanski's been really good in these type of games. And weirdly enough, Mike Tomlin has some weird 0-something record on the type of game they're playing in. So that's another interesting element that this is the type of game Mike Tomlin's group tends to drop. Just have a weird history of losing these type of games when you think they're ready to just take over the league.
Yeah. No Jed Wills. You mentioned Jermaine Ifedi, and Jaron Christian not ready yet. Interesting they bring him back. If it stays dry, they should be able to throw. You mentioned Pickens. I was reading he has been an absolute target monster with Russell Wilson. I think he has like one of the biggest target shares in the NFL since Wilson started playing. So frequently targets him. Both teams trying to throw the ball if it's dry a little bit. How do you explain the change in Russell Wilson's play from what we saw the last 2 years to this year?
Well, first and foremost, I think Russell Wilson is smart. He generally does a pretty good job of protecting the football. I think he's a really good fit with Arthur Smith's offense of ball control, play action, and he likes to throw those moon balls, which works really well for a guy like George Pickens. It worked really well with Cortland Sutton in Denver. Now, and the fact that he's been relatively turnover free also helps. Last week everybody was freaking out, and understandably given the interception he threw in the red zone, but for the most part, he's been pretty smart. He gave the Browns all kinds of fits in the early part of that Denver game last year, where you just saw where the Browns were lined up and sort of went the other way with plays. I just think that match between Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith has been really good. George Pickens, ball control, Pat Freiermuth, I think all those things work really well for what Russell Wilson does well, and you're not asking him to be. I think that's the big difference between what the Browns need, or the Steelers need from him versus what the Broncos need from him. The Broncos are expecting to be a franchise quarterback. The Steelers aren't.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we've got huge news over at the OBR. We want to, out of appreciation and for the reasons of getting 10 free subscribers behind the paywall to check out the entire experience over at theobr.com, our marketing team has created this very cool video. But for the next 3 days, you have the opportunity to get one of these 10 free subs. All you have to do is go over to the front page, follow the simple instructions, register, message Barry. It's very simple instructions, no credit card information needed, nothing like that. This is our way of saying thanks, and a great idea from somebody in our forums to, get some people that haven't been involved or behind the paywall a chance to experience what the OBR has to offer at its full capacity. So we are going to show this video, just kind of telling you what the OBR is all about. And make sure you get over to the OBR.com front page so you can get one of these 10 free subs. You have until noon on Monday. So you have 3 days to do this. So get over there right away and get registered so that you can win one of these. Here is the video.
It used to be flipped onto the end of your driveway. That's where you'd get your sports news, the latest on the Browns. The old sources just don't work anymore. Now it's all online, and you have to deal with trolls, bots, and aggregators who just fire off anything and everything to get your attention. There is, of course, an alternative. What's orange and brown and red all over. Heck, this alternative has been here since 1999, covering the team. Stacked with first-rate reporters who are at practice, in the locker room, working sources, breaking down film, crunching the numbers, evaluating prospects. It's all Browns all day, every day. All fueled by the most lively forums and Browns fan base anywhere. It's the OBR. Time to stuff your helmet with better stuff.
Very well done by our marketing team. Cool video. Make sure you get over to theobr.com and check it out. Follow the simple instructions to get one of the 10 free VIP subscriptions. Anything to say on this, Pete?
No, good stuff. I hope people try to take advantage as much as possible.
Absolutely. You got 3 days to do it, and I encourage you to do so. If you're watching on Twitter, hop on over to youtube.com/Orange and Brown Report and hit like and subscribe for the react here as we get into our regularly scheduled videos here. We're going to start tonight with, it's Nick Camino, right, Pete?
I believe so.
At NBC. So there's been a lot of talk about this. The Browns quit versus the Saints, right? This has been a popular topic. And we have a video of Nick talking about his feelings on that on NBC. And his take on the Browns and Saints game and exactly that. And we'll talk about it as well. Here we go.
Really bad now, beyond repair for this current season. This thing is over with. Your Cleveland Browns embarrassed again, this time down in New Orleans, 35-14 by the Saints. The Browns falling to 2-8 on the season. And how it looks on Sundays is even worse than the actual record, right? 2-8 is bad, but I trust my eyes. Okay, the Browns can say whatever they want. They can spin it however they want. They're going to say a lot of different things. They down in the Big Easy, okay? They quit. That game was tied 14-14 in the fourth quarter. They fall behind, and once it was a two-score game, they just quit in the fourth quarter. That's what it looked like. They quit. To me, that's shameful. That's embarrassing. Special teams have just, what has happened to Dustin Hopkins? The Browns kicker, he signed a nice contract extension over the offseason. He hasn't made a kick since then. The defense is like unrecognizable from a year ago. Offensively, there's very little spark, right? The future franchise quarterback is not here, is not on this roster. The playmakers aren't making very many plays. The offensive line looks old, and the guys that are young are either hurt or making business decisions not to play. And that brings me to Kevin Stefanski, the head coach. Does he shoulder all of the blame? No, not all of it. But much of this does begin to fall on him. Now, is that fireable? That's something a lot of people are going to be talking about. I'm not going that far yet. The two-time coach of the year, you just gave a contract. I'm not doing that. But a few coordinators could be shown the door. Offense, defense, special teams, everybody. I feel bad for Browns fans. I really do. You don't deserve this, especially coming off a trip to the playoffs last season. And not even just the losing, but the quitting, the lack of effort, the wasted football season that we're witnessing again in Cleveland.
All right, there it is, Pete. Did you see any effort issues on Sunday?
So the way I would sort of approach this is, and what I generally don't like is the sweeping generalizations. They quit when not everybody quit. There are clearly guys on this team who give everything they have. Myles Garrett can stop playing anytime he wants to get the foot surgery, and no one's going to blink. And if you go in our forums, there are people who are basically asking us on the insiders all the time, can the Browns please shut him down and get him going on his surgery and rehab? To suggest that everybody's quit is silly. Now, when you are now 2-8 and you give up those points like you did, and then that last one, that backbreaking touchdown, there is a little bit of a sort of exasperated feel that leads to some of that. Now, having said all that, individuals, the eye in the sky doesn't lie. If you can see them not doing it, then that becomes an issue, and the Browns will have to deal with that. Does that mean they have guys they need to move on from? Maybe. But I think that's more of a product of what the season has been than saying like this team has just quit, because this is largely a lot of these players are the same ones who played just to the echo of the whistle last year. They had more to fight for and everything else. And I think that's where you end up in this weird world where like, this is what losing does to a team. Like, as we'll see in some of the other stuff we have later, we generalize way too much on everything that this means. So Dustin Hopkins, like, it's not an effort question. He's a kicker. Like, What are we doing? And then to say that like the offense didn't do anything. Well, and here again, 14 points, it's not good enough. Now they would have 20 if they make kicks, but even that wasn't good enough. Nevertheless, they throw for 395 yards. You've got receivers making all kinds of plays. That's like the best thing they have going for them. I don't think guys on the line of scrimmage are quitting either. Like, that's where I sort of have an issue. Now, are there players that, and again, makes a bad generalization all about business decisions when it's one guy who is probably not going to be here next. I'd be stunned if he was back next year in Jedrick Wills. Yeah. But to use that to sort of generalize against the whole team is silly. And then, you get into the whole coordinator thing. You're going to fire all the coordinators. Sure. I mean, this is where you end up in this world where, like last year, even when the Browns were doing this and they were having the historic season of going 11-6, and they had this great defense. There are all these people who wanted to fire Kevin Stefanski and just give the job to Jim Schwartz. Now we are not even a year later. Now we're firing Jim Schwartz. So like, make up your mind. It's irrational. It doesn't make any sense. So you have to be more specific in criticism. Now I get it. He's, from his standpoint, he's got like a 2-minute segment to sort of air this out and try to sort of, be the shoulder to cry on for fans who are watching the local news for whatever reason, whatever. But like, again, you have to be more specific with criticism if you're going to really make these things stick. Otherwise, it just sounds like it's vapid and meaningless ultimately, because it's easy to turn around and watch guys who are trying endlessly. Like, just on defense, Isaiah McGuire is playing his butt off. Mahmoud Diabate playing his butt off. Now, these are young players, and Mahmoud Diabate and specifically made a huge mistake that allowed that last 75-yard touchdown that opened the door. Yeah. Now, at the same time, are there guys who didn't chase it down like they should have? Probably. Now, how far do you want to go with that? Again, it's on tape, and you are what you put on tape on some level. So the team's going to have to ultimately evaluate that stuff, and will be a factor and could potentially cost people jobs in the end. But that is something that they should take care of. Deal with it on an individual basis. Don't make the sweeping generalization that all these guys have done this, because one of the things I've seen, now that I have some time, is the amount of just clown shows going on in the rest of the league. The Giants are straight up tanking. They are not even pretending to tank, and they have players in that locker room coming out who are pissed off at how they're handling it, not like anonymously in front of a camera saying that this is crap and this, that, and the other. You've got endless mess with the Jets now, and now players are unhappy there. Now this stuff is more sources based, but either way, the entire state of New Jersey football is pissed, and it looked awful. The Jacksonville Jaguars situation is every week we're sitting here waiting for them to fire Doug Peterson, and then it's will they or won't they? Like, nothing the Browns are doing is reminiscent of that. The difference is, like, the Browns are playing bad football and losing, but you don't get this type of crap here because the Browns are genuinely on the same page. They understand what's going on, and like, they're not happy about it, but they're not finger pointing and doing all this other crap. You hear Myles Garrett talk about like general sort of what guys need to do for this team, but he's not sitting there going, this guy's a problem or this guy's a problem, or calling out coaches or anything else. There's a huge difference. Losing sucks. There's nothing that's going to change the fact that losing sucks. But I think it's a massive difference between how the Browns are losing and some of the other teams I've already mentioned.
Sure. What fans would point to would be Juan Thornhill and his then reaction to following that up with 2 days of social media posts, basically saying he doesn't care. I don't give a NF post on Instagram what people think about me. And then a rather funny one today, if it wasn't nonsense and circus-like, that he's posting on social media about being called out for his effort on that MVS touchdown. That he has the Forrest Gump gif, it says me Thursday, where he's running really fast. So making light of the subject today. And then you have also just playing devil's advocate here, DeJuan Jones posting about Bull, calling him out on his weight. So you have these guys on social media doing stuff that typically you wouldn't see from the Browns. Not really the best look, I don't think, for them to be engaging with fans in the media about topics like this. Do you agree? And did you see the play that everybody is talking about where it looks like Thornhill is just jogging lightly as Valdez-Scantling runs into the end zone?
As far as the DeJuan Jones thing, he's 22, I think, and had surgery. It's funny, but
it's funny.
You shouldn't do it.
Right.
I mean, it invites, because you get in these battles with people who are forever going to have the last word because they're either writing it or have a platform to talk. As far as like social media in general, like, it's usually not all that helpful, but like, compared to so many of these other teams, The
Yeah.
Browns are like nowhere. Micah
get it.
Parsons has a podcast every week. Like a lot of these players have podcasts every week. The Browns don't. Like this was a, as far as Cleveland sports goes, you have to go back to, when the Cavs won the championship, that you had people who were, they had that road tripping podcast, obviously, was a thing. You had active players on it. But for the most part, the Browns don't do much with social media. So, like, yeah, if you're losing, you become an easy target. Like, that's it. You're an easy target when you push back and do these things. We saw it with Baker Mayfield. It was a lot of fun when he was playing really well. It wasn't so much fun when he wasn't.
Sure.
So that's sort of the give and take you have. But like ultimately, the Browns' social media footprint is so small compared to every other team in the league that it's like, it's not that big of a deal. So, and here again, Juan Thornhill, that is a Juan Thornhill versus, the Browns organization issue. If the Browns deem it a problem, they can move on from him after this year. That's, if you're going to pick out one play, for a lot of people, you can find plays where they don't do what you want them to do in that moment. But at the same time, like, then we go the other route. Dustin Hopkins hurts himself hustling as hard as he can on a kickoff return. So, like, there are these situations where at times you just can't win. Ultimately, the bottom line is losing. So we'll see what happens with Juan Thornhill after the season. Will this be the defining play of it? I doubt it. If the Browns win tomorrow, I doubt anyone will think about it. And if it becomes a recurring theme, then, the Browns are going to have to make the decision. One random play in this particular thing, not a big deal. I mean, I go back to the playoff game last year, and I remember Martin Emerson on one particular play where he just sort of did nothing on a particular play. I don't immediately give up on Martin Emerson. I just think it's a really bad play and something to learn from. So we'll see where they go with it.
Yeah, I generally think that's pretty fair. And to your point, it's a lot worse other places. The thing that I'll say the one thing that bothers me about the Thornhill thing is it's like if you're getting questioned for effort and if your coaching staff sees the same thing where it's kind of blatant, right? The actual play.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, I get it. Maybe he didn't think he was going to catch him or whatever. You know what I mean? There's a number of things, or he was hurt. He didn't want to open up. I know he's had an issue. Maybe he didn't want to open it up and sprint for a play that, you know what I mean? There's a number of things it could be. But either way, like, okay, I'm sure it was discussed or you watch film with your coaches, and then you take to social media like after that or whatever. Like that seems like maybe crossing a boundary a little bit.
Yeah, and specifically to Juan Thornhill, like that particular part of it is sort of like, yeah, again, makes you an easy target. On the other hand, like Juan Thornhill got crushed for being positive about this team last year. And he was right. He was absolutely right.
You are right.
People got so mad at him for saying we're going to be good this year. And they went 11-6. And I thought it was absolutely righteous for him to walk off that Jets field holding the play, the whiteboard with playoffs written on it. Like, that is who Juan Thornhill is. He is super positive, super energy guy. And I'm sure he's frustrated with the calf injuries, and there are people who want to run him off this team. I think he's a very good safety. I think the Browns should hold on to him, but that's ultimately between him and them. And if they've determined this is a problem, they can move on and go a different direction. But like, to me, I think he's a good player. That's a bad play. Coach him, get after him, do whatever you got to do to get him the right space. But again, I watch teams like Jacksonville, where I watch a team-wide just non-effort in games and like, to me, that is a team that is like playing out the string. Yes, the Browns like basically spit the bit at the end of the fourth quarter, which is a bad look and something that they have to get over the hump with and figure out. But that is a sort of a symptom of what it has been this season. Up to that point, they fought. They just didn't play well enough, and ultimately that's why they lost.
Yeah. You're watching The React with Pete Smith. My name is Brad Ward. This next video here tonight, we're going back to good old Joey Riccatone. I don't know how much of this we'll get through. And this is his take on why this is all Paul DePodesta's fault. I'm sure we'll be stopping this a few times to talk about some of the liberties taken here, but entertaining nonetheless. Always as always, from Joey.
Really, first and foremost, is to not only help us create, but also implement that shared vision, and then ultimately make sure that we stick to it, really relentlessly. When I think of analytics, I just think of having sort of frameworks to make decisions under uncertainty.
Information is power. So we like to have a lot of information that informs our decisions.
And Paul, where is Paul at tonight?
Paul's back in California.
That's right, Paul, thank you.
And whether that's hiring someone, whether that's how we do scouting, whether it's how we look at things, with numbers.
How do you fire the offensive coordinator after you just won 11 games with 4 different quarterbacks, with your 4th and 5th tackles, without Nick Chubb?
I already think that Paul DePodesta is either on his way out of the organization or just in a completely different role that is going to have nothing to do with actual draft picks.
What role would he have then?
At the halfway point in the 2024 season, the Browns are 2-7, and this video is going to be about something greater than just the record now, because we've been looking for who do we put the blame on? Is it Andrew Berry and his drafting? Is it Kevin Stefanski's play calling? We're looking everywhere except for at the person who has made the bulk of the major macro decisions in Cleveland. So the party line has been that they're all in unison. They've all been on the same page for all of the decisions that they've made. But if that were true, why would Kevin Stefanski be open to firing Alex Van Pelt, a guy who was a key figure in helping turn around the Browns over the past 4 seasons? 2023 wasn't about the analytics. It wasn't about DePodesta's 5-year plan. They had those things in place, and then Nick Chubb gets injured, and then Deshaun Watson goes down, and then you're on your 4th and 5th tackle. It was about the coaching. It was about Kevin Stefanski and Jim Schwartz and Bill Callahan and Alex Van Pelt. It was about those guys coaching what they had on the field and ultimately creating a winning culture, from gutting out tight, improbable wins and ultimately leading into a playoff berth. So after all of that, he fired Stefanski's offensive partner in Alex Van Pelt and then brought in Ken Dorsey so they could pull more out of Deshaun Watson. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds in that situation because, like I said, I understand the move to a degree, but the reasoning behind it is so faulted because you saw what was working. Even in Watson's last start before the Achilles tear, they went back to the Stefanski offense and they actually started to look decent. 15 for 17, over 100 yards, and they were dry.
All right, I got to address that. I didn't think he looked decent in that game. It was check down city. The numbers, I've heard people say this, that he looked good in the game that he got hurt. I didn't think he looked good. I thought he looked the same as he had all season. He was checking down everything that he had. And I didn't see anything that showed me that they were reverting to a different offense.
They weren't, because there is no other offense. There's one offense. And he helped implement it. So, okay, let's start here. There's an organizational chart where the chief strategy officer is in his own little world, off to one side. There's the football ops, there's, coaching, all this stuff. And the analytics department, which is not under his leadership. Ken Kovash runs the analytics department. Let's start there. So the belief that a lot of people have is that it's like, it's like Lord of the Rings, the two towers, where that little goblin guy is sort of controlling the king. This is not how this works. He does not have the power. He does not have the power to fire anyone. He certainly doesn't have the power to fire a coach. Like, what are you talking about? I always come back to the same thing. Why would Kevin Stefanski want to work here? If this is if this is the situation he's in, where the chief strategy officer, who can give his advice, give his opinion, all these other things, he cannot fire the offensive coordinator. That is ludicrous on its face. It makes no sense to suggest that that's a real thing. It did not happen. Kevin Stefanski, as we talked, let's revisit the conversation where we were last, at the end of last year. What does Alex Van Pelt do was a common question. People were asking. They had no idea. And I said at the time, we will find out more about what Alex Van Pelt does by absentia than he ever was when he was here, which is what has happened. Now, ultimately, the other thing that I pointed out, and we've talked about endlessly on this, the Browns offense was getting stale relative to the people they had. The people they had did not fit. They were trying to run wide zone and all these other things with DeJuan Jones, who cannot do that. He is a guy who's going to block down, double team, those type of things. So you had to evolve the offense. And yes, a massive part of that was Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson did not have a great relationship with Alex Van Pelt. That was certainly part of it. But there were other factors in this. And one of the things we talked about, the Browns could not run the ball at all last year. So part of the changes they made was trying to get to a system where they could run the ball better. And it's not going very well right now at all. Now, we can point to some of the things with the offensive line. We can point to the fact that the running back situation isn't ideal and Nick Chubb's sort of kind of getting healthier. But a lot of it just comes down to the line of scrimmage, which would have been true the previous year. But they had to do these things. This was Kevin Stefanski making the decision. Who the hell misses Stump Mitchell? Really? Like, they didn't get rid of Bill Callahan. He opted to leave. So Alex Van Pelt's the one guy who they got rid of, and at the time, nobody cared. Nobody was sitting there going, "Man, we really need Alex Van Pelt."
He was the glue. He was the glue.
Yeah, Albert Breer's thing where he was the glue, and they have one of the worst offenses in the league in New England, and a lot of that I would attribute to talent. I think Alex Van Pelt's actually doing a nice job with Drake May, but I think Drake May is just really good. But that is not the chief strategy officer had nothing to do with this. Why would he? Like, why would Paul DePodesta want to get involved in all of these other things? Even if you watch Moneyball and you're sitting there going, like, at what point did he fire Art Howe? He didn't. Yeah. Like, this isn't how this works. So this is where you get into this insane world of we get to a conclusion and we try to work. We get to the conclusion. Paul DePodesta is the bad guy. And we start working our way backwards to justify why Paul DePodesta is a bad guy. Instead of understanding what he actually does, which is exactly how he lays out. You figure out processes to be more efficient and you stick to a plan. So some of these major decisions, I'm sure he's weighing in and telling what he thinks, but ultimately what he's really saying is, hey, according to the guidelines we have set up, quarterback is the most important position in the league or in sports. So you have to do whatever you can to get that franchise quarterback. Is he the one saying they should go get Deshaun Watson? I doubt it, but he might be saying, hey, this is how you value this, so you have to do it, or those type of things. He's not making draft picks. He's not doing any of these things people are saying he is. He is an advisor who makes a whole lot of money. I understand. But most of the stuff he does that's beneficial is, one, being copied by other teams, and two, stuff you're never going to see or be able to sort of point a finger at. But it becomes very easy because we can't sit there and go, show me your work, Paul DePodesta, that we come up with all these weird jobs he has, which isn't how any of this works. They have a very defined setup. Jimmy Haslam's at the top, Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski and Paul DePodesta are essentially on even footing, as is Ken Kovash, and all these other people are all on the same sort of level. None of these people can fire anyone else from anyone else's department. Go imagine your job doing this. This isn't real life. So this is just conspiracy theory crap in more fan fiction.
I really think Pete and Brad spend more time arguing for the franchise than the actual dudes do working on the franchise.
Sure. They don't do any work.
Right. Very cool, Foxy. The truth, though, is he's actually not selecting players in the draft. He's not making trades. He's not firing coaches. I'm sure he can lend his input, but
the fact that he's in meetings matters. There's no getting around those high-level meetings that matter. He's in those, and that matters. But here's the thing. You know who else is in a lot of those meetings right now? Mike Vrabel. And everybody wants to give Mike Vrabel a pass on everything while blaming everything on Paul DePodesta. So you got to make up your mind on which way you want to go on this, because Mike Vrabel is involved in a lot of those high-level discussions.
All right.
diving down before his Achilles popped. That move and seeing how successful Watson was starting to look back in that offense completely voided the decision that DePodesta made to fire Van Pelt and bring in Dorsey. It made it a worthless decision that only ruined your team cohesion. The biggest issue with Paul DePodesta is that his philosophy of running a football organization is built off of his past experiences in running a baseball organization.
No,
and those two are not a one-for-one match. DePodesta talks a lot about process rather than just looking at outcome. And there is some value there in certain situations. But what DePodesta fails to grasp is that NFL contracts are shorter. The life cycle of an NFL player is shorter.
I'm sure he certainly understands that about the game of baseball and football. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that like DePodesta is, this, that, or the other. I don't know enough, to your point, about what decisions he's impacted or not. But I know he's a smart guy, and I know that he understands the difference between the length of a baseball season and a football season.
To answer this question, Kevin is in charge. Yes, Kevin is in charge. He makes his own decisions. That doesn't mean he doesn't listen to other people. Doesn't mean he's taking his marching orders from them either. Ultimately, it's his decision. This is not difficult to do. In the same way that if you were at your job and you are a manager type person and you listen to other people, you still have to make the decision. So like that makes no sense to say that just because he listens to other people or they're involved in these meetings or he wants to what Mike Vrabel's job largely ends up being is being a sounding board. That doesn't mean those guys are making decisions. That does, but again, the fact that they are in some of those meetings does matter. Now, here again, what level of meetings? This is insane. No, he's not.
DePodesta is not involved in the game plan.
That doesn't make any sense.
That is insane.
He doesn't this assumes so much that is unlikely at best and more than likely not happening. He would have to understand the language that they are speaking, and I doubt he does. I don't think he understands coverages. I don't think he sits there and understands how defenses work. Let's take this guy's video at face value, and his video is fantastic production as always, even though he's wrong. Let's take it at face value. He's saying he's running a football team like a baseball team, that he doesn't understand any of the things that would matter in understanding how the game plan is. Like if they're calling, speaking a language of how they run their offense or defense or whatever, then he's not going to understand it. So it would mean nothing to him. It would be a waste of his time. He would have nothing to offer. This is where like you are then spending however much money, if it's 10 million or whatever a year, to have him do something that means nothing to him. Complete waste. He's going to focus his job elsewhere. But in terms of like overall, what is the focus of the team? What are we trying to accomplish? Those are things he can actually sort of ensure that, sort of ask the questions or guide them in the direction that they've all agreed they want to go. In other words, if the Browns say, hey, we want to do this, he can say, hey, how does this fit in our overall goals? How is this going to impact other choices we make? What are the opportunity costs of doing this relative to the other goals we have? Those are the type of things you want somebody like him to ask you and to be able to answer and feel confident in your answers. Like that's a reasonable thing. If you want to call him the devil's advocate in that scenario, it's important, but it does have value in terms of what he can offer in those. But in terms of game plan, I don't think Paul DePodesta cares about Jim Schwartz running inverted cover 2 on 3rd and long.
He doesn't. I would just say, like, there's a lot of assumption, like right in the chat. We're getting attacked a lot. It's fine. I'm not saying we're right or wrong, but we're on a show, so we're going to lend our opinion. So take it or leave it. You can disagree if you want. Secondly, Steve, the thing that's funny about what you say is you say people know Vrabel as a coach, but the thing is Vrabel is also a front office person, and you don't know anything about what he's done in the front office or what he did in the front office. And when I say that I don't know what DePodesta's job title is, I'm saying I don't know exactly what decisions he may have weighed in on. As Pete already described, his job is process, right? His job is focus on the process. Make sure the processes that are in place are pointing them to the larger long-term goal of the organization. That's what he's done. He's not there day to day. He's not. It's just
the idea that
this is what we know.
Jimmy also doesn't make any sense. Jimmy just goes right to the coach. He can just go right to Kevin Stefanski. He can go to Andrew Berry. He can go to Mike Vrabel. He can go straight to these people. There's no middleman. This is the problem people don't understand. Yes, if they're in the meeting, they're in the meeting. But like this idea that like he's a middleman. No, the Browns literally got rid of that because they ran into this huge problem with this in previous setup when they had John Dorsey and some of these other Hugh Jackson, all these other people, where it became this political nonsense, and they cut all of that out. They got rid of all of it, and now it's just Jimmy has them straight to these individual people. Now, if they're in the same meeting, so be it. But ultimately, there is no like Paul DePodesta is not distilling what other people are telling him to Jimmy Haslam. It doesn't make any sense. He could just go to those people. And Jimmy's in the building more than Paul DePodesta is. He would have access to them.
Yeah. So I never said he is making the game plan, but he is listening to each game plan to report to Jimmy. So he's basically DePodesta is like the tattletale of game plans.
That's not what his job is.
No.
That's it. Again, you're distilling him down to a secretary or some sort of administrative assistant rather than what his job is, which is very big and very important overall. And I don't care what Mary Kay reported. I'm sure she says sounds great, and I'm not trying to discredit her. But ultimately, I can't. This is the thing we get into. Unless he understands the language they are speaking in terms of game planning and all this other stuff, it doesn't mean anything. It's the same deal. Like I've tried to explain this before. Where I coach high school, a new offensive coach comes in. It usually takes them a full year just to understand everything we're trying to do, if not more. That's high school compared to the NFL. So if they change systems, then Paul DePodesta would effectively have to learn an entire new language, or even if they use similar language, have to adjust to all of these other things on 3 different phases of the game. That's not going to happen.
Give me a break. Being collaborative means no one has to be held accountable. Barry
That's
is
also
an
not
idiot.
true. Because if that was true, then they wouldn't fire anyone. And they have, and they've tried to upgrade at various points. And the reality is most of the people, like from the front office standpoint, are getting promoted out as opposed to being replaced for the wrong reasons. Like that's why it defies blame. And here you ask, who's to blame? It's a collective failure. Like this is the problem. Everybody wants easy answers. Who's to blame? What are you talking about? Kevin Stefanski's to blame because they're 2-8. Andrew Berry's to blame because they're 2-8. Like this is very easy to do. Deshaun Watson's to blame because they're 2-8. Like they are 2-8. You are what your record is. Now we can also sit there and explain why they are like that and sit there and go, okay, they're bad and they have to own that. But that also doesn't mean we have to then fire everybody because they are bad this year.
That is the point.
It's not a binary choice. It's either succeed or be fired.
So, Foxy, you seem to want to come at me, even though I'm not doing a lot of the talking, and that's fine. But either way, there's a massive failure here. The trade going for Deshaun Watson was a massive failure. I think this season went in the tank because of quarterback play and injury mostly. Everyone, as Pete said, has failed this year at some level. So, yes, you can't be 2-8 without people doing things wrong or failing. I am just saying that I don't think, Foxy, that warrants firing all of them, because I think that Stefanski is a good coach. And personally, I think that Andrew Berry is a good GM. Now,
here's the thing. Like you mentioned the Jets. I wouldn't have fired Robert Saleh. I wouldn't have fired the GM either. I think they made some stupid choices, but ultimately, that's why I think they have a problem. I think that Woody Johnson, who at least reportedly, and this is the problem you run into, was dictating things above, basically dictating how the team's going to operate. that is where I sort of get lost in all that. Like, so the other example I used the Titans. So Mike Vrabel went 6-18 in his last 24 games. And this is, I point this out for people who want to go, oh, the Browns should fire Kevin Stefanski and go with Mike Vrabel. I also will tell you, I think Mike Vrabel is an excellent coach. I don't think the Titans should have fired him. I think that was a huge mistake, but on their part. And I think they're paying for it right now. Like, yeah, they were not good. Their roster had sort of deteriorated to a point where it like needed a huge infusion of talent. But I also think that they had a really good coach, and they're going to regret firing him ultimately. And that's not to say I like or dislike Brian Callahan. I have no idea. But I do think Mike Vrabel is a good coach. They made the choice to fire him. I think they will regret it. In the same way that for the people who want to fire Kevin Stefanski, I think it would be a massive, massive mistake for them to do that, because you are going to end up – I mean, look, let me put it this way. I can't wait for the next Pat Shurmur, Freddie Kitchens, Hugh Jackson, or what would have been Josh McDaniels had they not hired Kevin Stefanski. These are the things. Hell, reportedly, Jimmy Haslam wanted to hire was the driving force or a huge proponent of hiring Doc Rivers for the Milwaukee Bucks. Like, they got lucky that Kevin Stefanski came back and was willing to take this job when they hired Freddie Kitchens over him, because he really, by all right, should have told him to stick it and walked away into a better job. So, like, I can tell you that, one, it is Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry's fault, particularly for the trade. I can tell you it's their fault because they're 2-8, and that's what happens when you're 2-8. You own the blame. But I also think they are good at what they do, despite one of the biggest mistakes ever, which they will have to eat at some point. We talked about that in the show after the Andrew Berry press conference. They have to come out and eat that. But like, that is the nature of the beast. So, in the question I always ask anyone, what is the best path forward? And to me, the best path forward is sticking with Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry. Now, ultimately, if we get into the whole court, like we go with Nick Camino's idea of firing coordinators, that is a Kevin Stefanski decision. And if he wants to make that change, so be it. But that is how this works. Let the guys do their jobs and proceed forward. Or at least that's my view on it.
Yeah. And for King of all blunders, certainly you're entitled to that opinion that you want a clean house. There's a lot of people that feel that way. I personally think it would just set back the organization, and that's not like a defense of them being 2-8. I just think that the best way forward is with the guys that they already have in place. Yeah, there's no, we're here doing a show. There's no reason to call people names or anything like that. We can have a nice discussion without any of that. So let's try to keep it civil.
Injuries are way more severe, and you only play 17 games in a season. So development cannot be prioritized when constructing a roster. In the MLB, you have countless farm leagues. You might have 5, 6 leagues where you can have an international 16-year-old player go in, and he spends the better part of a decade developing, where eventually he'll get the call up to the big leagues. That's the kind of runway you have in baseball. And that's how Sports Illustrated predicted that the Astros were going to win the World Series in 2017 and hit it right on the head. They just looked at their farm league talent. They said they're going to spend X amount of time in these leagues and they're going to move up together. And then in 2017, they will be ready to win the big championship. You can predict those things in baseball for all of the reasons I mentioned. The farm leagues, the long contracts, the lower likelihood of significant injuries, the longer careers where you can have star players who play well into their 30s. And that young talent that you've been working and developing in the farm leagues can now come and help and contribute while your star.
Yeah.
So I don't know crap about baseball, but I know what the Oakland A's were doing. They were poor. So they figured out a way to work around the money. So the idea that they can play well into the 30s, yeah, I guess that's true. But the whole point was they had to try to work around the fact that they were broke and figure it out through those means, as opposed to what he's saying, where the Houston Astros in this case, they pay a whole lot of money for these guys to stick around and keep playing well. So yeah, the farm system and all this stuff matters, but ultimately you're misunderstanding the reason why the Moneyball approach in the Oakland A's did worked, and why it no longer works is because everybody else in the league adapted to it. So he can, Paul DePodesta is a really smart guy, whatever anybody wants to think about him. So he has to adapt to the reality he's in. I don't think he's sitting there going, man, we got to play money ball in terms of the way he did it in baseball. I think ultimately you are always trying to find areas where you can find good value or depressed assets or opportunities to take advantage of things that other teams are not doing. And you see that in some of the things the Browns are doing. For example, the 2023 draft. I've talked about this before. I will say it again. The reason I love that draft process outside of Siaki Ika is because they focus so much on the premium money positions in the draft. And they sort of set up their roster to enable them to get safety and linebacker after the draft. They signed Ronnie Hickman. They signed Tanner McAllister out of Ohio State. They took 2 guys at that position. Ronnie Hickman ultimately won the job. He's still here and looks pretty good relative to the role they have him in. I'm not suggesting he's a starter, but pretty good player. Mahmoud Diabate, they sort of clear this path, non-premium position, and go, hey, we're going to sign a couple guys. They signed him, and they signed Charlie Thomas III, who I really like but got hurt this year. Mahmoud Diabate is now producing and looks like he has the possibility of being a starter on this team. That is taking an avenue where other teams did not find value or may have used up the roster spots they would have in those draft picks in the area of the draft where the Browns spent all of their draft picks on the premium spots, the spots you always have the most difficult time acquiring, which is exactly how they should do it. So if you're talking about a money ball approach, and I'm not suggesting this was Paul DePodesta's idea. I'm just saying this is what happened. And this is why I think good process does matter and is really smart. Regardless of whose idea it was, they did it that way and it worked out. The Browns did the same thing this year with tight end at the very least. There was at least one other position off the top of my head. I don't remember. But they sort of cleared this path, and what was a sort of lackluster tight end class. They signed the undrafted dude from Wyoming. Didn't work, but ultimately that was the swing you took, and you focused on the other positions in the draft. And I think that's something they should do every year. So is that a money ball approach? Yeah, to me it is, but it's not like trying to be like baseball or anything else. And it's not managing a team like baseball or anything else. I think it's, just talking about all the people who think Paul DePodesta suddenly knows all this stuff about football. He's suggesting they don't. I think he's smarter than what he's sort of leading you to believe, but ultimately that still doesn't mean he's doing, the X's and O's type of stuff. He just sort of understands the landscape. He studies what's going on and sees these trends and looks at this and goes, these are ways you could potentially find ways to exploit talent. These are ways to do just process in terms of evaluation or other things that I think are good and smart and the way you should be doing it. Are they all going to work? Of course not. But that's just why you should do these things, to figure out ultimately what's the best path forward. And what we have seen is the Browns drafting has gotten better with time. 2023 was what looks like a very productive draft, despite not having a whole lot of resources. Now, some of that is blind luck. The way the draft fell was spectacular for them. Getting Isaiah McGuire and DeJuan Jones in round 4 just fell beautifully for them. There's always that factor, because if other teams took those guys, they aren't there for you to take. Simple. But ultimately, when those guys were in the spots, they took them. It worked out for them, is working out for them. Now they have 2 guys at premium positions that look promising. Granted, the DeJuan Jones situation sucks with the broken ankle, but that is money ball. That is stuff I want them to do all the time. This is how I evaluate the why I think the analytics stuff is smart. Yes, you still have to watch the tape. This, for people who read my article on quarterbacking stuff, I'm going to be doing a lot of these type of things in terms of how I evaluate relative to combining data versus, tape and all these other things. So yes, that is why I think it's going to be, why I continue to like that approach. Now, ultimately, the Browns may, there is a possibility that Paul DePodesta sort of works himself out of a job. He works himself right, he basically does his job and he's sort of done. That is possible. That is something where I could see that they basically just get to a point where they're sort of done, or he may just be done doing it, whatever. But they should always have somebody who's operating in that capacity that I think is valuable. So yeah, and to answer the question of name one, they don't have an offensive star, but Cedric Tillman looks pretty good, as you mentioned. And DPJ, maybe no better than DPJ. He's already better than DPJ, and DPJ was a 6th-round pick, which was really successful. So yeah, I do like the process. And again, it comes down to maximizing opportunities when you have them. And when they had the opportunity, they did really well with Cedric Tillman. They did really well with DPJ. Are there misses? Absolutely. Again, it's about process and trying to do things the right way. And I to go back to the baseball analogy, I want the Browns to hit the ball hard every time. I don't, some of those are going to go right to the right two fielders and be outs, but I want them to hit the ball hard every time. I don't want to rely on bloop singles and accidents that work out. That was John Dorsey's approach, and I'm not a fan of it. I understand why people sit there and go, well, look at the results. Yeah, I get it, but it wasn't a good process, and that's why he's not here. I like process. I like what they're talking about in terms of process. I think that's a really smart way to operate.
I would also say that they, got Amari Cooper in a trade with a draft pick, and now also you have a wide receiver with Jerry Jeudy, who is looking like he is, trending towards 1,000 yards. Not that I don't know if he'll get there. He had to deal with awful quarterback play for the first 8 weeks. So,
but here's the thing: we talk about name one star on offense. Well, here's the thing: what is the most promising position on the Browns right this second? It's wide receiver. We are most excited for, if you're looking at the way they played this past Sunday, you're looking at some of these other things. We're sitting there going, well, name all the stars they have on offense. They don't have any. Well, yeah, but here's the thing. If you're sitting there going, what are you excited about? Jerry Jeudy, they acquired him. He looks to be everything they need him to be. A top of the line number 2 at worst, low end number 1, which given the contract they paid out looks pretty good right now. Cedric Tillman, very, very interesting player. He's got to keep going, but every game he does something you're happy about. And even Elijah Moore, who I think they will try to bring back for another year, I'm hoping he continues to play like this. And you have David Njoku. That's a really good setup. So if you're sitting there going, what is the most positive thing the Browns have going for them right this second? It's that group. So that is where you sort of lose me on this whole idea. Well, name an offensive star. Well, they've got a really nice wide receiver room. I hope they're not done. And Jamari Threat, we'll see what he does. But he obviously caught his first ball. I was happy to see that. And the Browns, I watched Cam Justice talk with Quincy Carrier on this and saying the Browns love him. So we'll see. Keep doing good. As I always say, this is what, I got pushback when I said this about the Amari Cooper trade. Do smart things. The fact that you're losing this season is not great, but that shouldn't preclude you from doing smart things. Trading for Amari Cooper the way they did was really smart. Trading Zadarius Smith, even though I don't love the return on that, was really smart. I don't ever want the Browns to stop doing really smart things.
Listen,
I agree.
I agree
they need to
too.
do better.
But I would also say that, over the last 5 years, I said 3 years. Yeah, of course they need to do better. You can always do better, and they need to hit on playmakers better. But they have supplemented. The one thing that AB has done is he's been able to supplement with trades. And I don't remember going into a season saying, there's not enough playmakers on this team.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's look, you can never have too. It's like the pass rushers. You can never have too many. You can never have too many corners.
I get that.
Yeah, and the quarterback thing is the thing. And here I've said it. I will continue to say it. If you're going to fire Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, you should do it over Deshaun Watson and the acquisition of Deshaun Watson. The problem is they aren't, and since they aren't, I got to go on the next question, which is what is the best path forward, and that is clearly what Jimmy Haslam's evaluating him on. Because if he wasn't, he wouldn't have signed him to a contract extension. He would have said, "Hey, look, you got to make Deshaun work this year, or you're gone." And even if that meant you go, with the uncertainty of not having a contract extension, so be it. This is your guy. Go out and make it work. And then they could have simply said, "No, it didn't. So let's move on." But that is not that is not the way they're grading them. That's not the way they're evaluating them. They seem to like what they are doing, even though that it hasn't worked. And to their credit, Deshaun Watson has been a complete disaster, and they went to the playoffs without him. And they, as we keep saying, and I keep saying, follow Jack Duffin's work. They'll be fine on the salary cap. It won't be fun, but they will be fine. They're fine. They're projected to have slated to have 11 draft picks right now in next year's draft. So at the very least, you can say, yeah, it's, the Deshaun Watson thing was a debacle, but at least they are from here working with all their draft assets as before they were not.
Steve Kramer asking, what do you think the best path forward if you're Andrew Berry, not what they would do, but what you would do?
Oh, that's a good question. I would attack the lines of scrimmage this offseason, both sides, hard. I've talked about it. I think they need a tackle, a guard, and a center at the very least. We'll see what happens with DeJuan Jones, but it really doesn't change my viewpoint. I thought they needed to get a tackle anyway. You have to get somebody to back up and sort of eventually replace Jack Conklin, even though he's playing really well. But either with Jack Conklin or DeJuan Jones, you can't trust that they're going to stay healthy for 17 games. There's no basis for it. It would be a bad process not to address that anyway, but they should address it in the draft. They should get somebody to develop to eventually be a starter. I think so much of this, and this was the thing for me last year, was in addition to getting younger on the offensive line, they need to get cheaper. And that doesn't mean cheaper in terms of quality. It means cheaper in the fact that they need to get young players on rookie deals as opposed to having veterans who are sort of going to be processed out. Jedrick Wills is going to be processed out almost certainly. Would not surprise me if Ethan Posick is processed out. We'll see. Joe Bitonio might retire. I'm not there with Wyatt Teller, but who knows? You're going to have either way. You just drafted Zach Sinter, which certainly you're not done. You need to draft another guard. You might need to sign a free agent guard and center. I think you're going to have to sign a free agent center. We'll see what happens defensively. I am in no hurry to get rid of Dalvin Tomlinson, but I am in a hurry to continue to build up the defensive tackle position. Mike Hall's injury is unfortunate. I really like what I see from Isaiah McGuire. Obo Okoronkwo is fine for another year. Myles Garrett's obviously a phenomenon, and then Alex Wright is interesting. Now, I would continue to attack edge. If there's a good opportunity to get an edge player, even if it's early in the draft, I'm doing it because you can't have too many. And the way the Browns defense works, you have guys like Alex Wright, and you saw it even last week. Isaiah McGuire drove a guard into the quarterback's lap. They can move them up and down the line and play them all over the place. So you can always get more, but more defensive interior players with, just to continue to build that up. I'm always looking to have eight to 10 guys on that side of the ball that can dominate the line of scrimmage. In that way, I sort of look at the Browns taking a similar approach to the Pittsburgh Steelers did this past offseason. The Steelers drafted 3 linemen. They signed at least one just on offense. They, continue to build the defensive, continue to invest defensively, all those things. And I think that's an easy path to get to being competitive again, even if you're going with Jameis Winston, whether that's the ideal opportunity or not. And then you got to try to find a quarterback, obviously, that's long-term. So even if you go with Jameis Winston or whoever is a bridge, you got to be looking all the time, every year to see if somebody fits. That doesn't mean you have to do it early. Go back to it. They are in a Stefanski system.
I think what they mean, I get this a lot. You know what they mean though, like his core stuff. Like you're seeing kind of like a what do you want to call it? It's a combination of both.
If you were to to me right now, this looks like a very nice tight end draft. If you were to say you really like the tight ends in this group, and let's say you're at the top of the second round and you draft Tyler Warren out of Penn State, who I really like, and you want to use more double tights. I mean, Tyler Warren's a guy who can play a true inline Y, and you want to do those type of things. Great. if you want to sign it, if you want to draft a guy like Harold Fannin out of Bowling Green, another guy I really like, he's not an inline guy. He's more of a space player, but he's a weapon. He's sort of more in that Isaiah Likely mold. That is something that Ken Dorsey did with the Bills when they drafted Dalton Kincaid. They already had Preston Knox. Like, you can do a lot of those things. So, I mean, what I want is for them, the Browns is to take the things that work and then carry those forward and then adapt everything else around the personnel you have now, not the personnel you used to have, not the personnel you want to have, the personnel you do have. So if they, that's the easy example for me to use. If you get another tight end you really like, you should do things to sort of cater to those tight ends and use them to do those type of things. But in terms of like, the run game and some of those things, I have no problem with what they're doing. I just want better people doing it. And I want healthier guys doing it. I want those things to work right, because like Jack Conklin has clearly proven to me that he can do whatever you need him to do. He's very good.
In my opinion, Britton, I think that ultimately that depends a lot on who you decide is going to play quarterback for you.
Yes.
You have to match your system to your quarterback, and ultimately that will determine much.
Not only that, but the Browns give the quarterback a lot of power. They give them veto power. So like, the Jameis Winston, like you talk about different offensive systems, really it's more quarterback driven than that. Jameis Winston's going to pick plays that Jameis Winston feels good about. Deshaun Watson picked plays that Deshaun Watson felt good about. I don't know how many of those there were because I didn't see any of them, but he did pick them. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is going to pick plays that he feels are good for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Like, that is where you really see the difference to me in the offense. So like, this is the common misconception as far as I'm concerned when you look at last year and they go, well, look at the Joe Flacco offense. Well, the Joe Flacco offense existed because Joe Flacco picked it. He took the playbook and said, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do, this is where I feel like my strengths are. He felt good about turning his back to the defense on play action. That's something Deshaun Watson doesn't feel comfortable doing. So if Kevin Stefanski has said over and over and over again, he's not going to make a quarterback run plays they are not comfortable with. So like, that is really where you see the differentiation. Jacoby Brissett had more of a similar preferences as Joe Flacco. So those offenses looked similar, whereas Deshaun Watson and Dorian Thompson-Robinson are a little bit more spread out and more gun oriented. So like, to me, that's really where the difference in offense comes in. To Brad's point, he's exactly right. The quarterback's going to have more to do with that than anything. But like, we get in the weeds about running game and stuff. I'm perfectly happy to just run gap stuff, duo, zone kick, all that type of stuff. As long as they're successful with it, do what works.
Neither on Jameis, Daniel Jones, or Aaron Rodgers. Jameis.
Yeah, if those are my options, yeah. And here's the thing: I don't hate Daniel Jones the same way some people do. I just if Jameis plays the way he's playing and can keep basically have the Joe Flacco effect, great. You got a 10-year younger version of what you had. For all the people who were, the season's ruined that you didn't re-sign Joe Flacco. Well, Jameis Winston can effectively be the same thing. There's a little more volatility, but largely the same. And I think you're better off doing that than signing Daniel Jones, to me.
All right, you're watching the React. This is a new video here. A new video. The next video here is from 92.3 The Fan. Then we're going to have two back-to-back videos here from the afternoon drive because they are connected. He has been throwing it to the turkey hole. You are right, Stephen. All right, so here we go with this. This is Nick Wilson, Jonathan Peterlin, afternoon drive with the first one is with Albert Breer on the future of this regime.
When it comes to Stefanski, Barry, DePodesta, the whole lot, big sweeping changes, do you think that the difference between 0-8, but it looks competitive, and 0-8 and it looks Non-competitive is the difference between many people getting fired and no one getting fired?
Yeah, I think things would have to be pretty cataclysmic the rest of the way for everybody to get fired. It took the Haslams, a lot of time to get to the point where they really had a setup that they were comfortable with and they liked. And you guys lived it, like everybody out there listening lived it, saw the half measures and all right, well, let's do this and this. And, let's get let's get the analytics guy in Sashi Brown. No, that didn't work. Let's go get John Dorsey instead. And, trying to marry analytics and hardcore football with you and Sashi working together. It's just so many different iterations of it. You had Kyle Shanahan in the building and he hated it so much that he wrote a manifesto on why he wanted to leave,
Mm-hmm.
So, it took them a long time to get to something that they really were comfortable with and they really liked. And I think that they got there with Kevin and with Andrew and with Paul DePodesta over the top of it. And I think, DePodesta being there, for DePodesta's presence there before all of this sort of, I think, telegraphed that maybe this was the sort of direction they wanted to go in to begin with, So I just have a hard time seeing them pulling up stakes on the entire operation. Again, unless it gets to some point where you're like, there is no way they can go forward with this. So does it look great now? No. But I think you could argue, given the quarterback situation and where it is, given their situation at tackle and what that's been, it's pretty easy to get to a point where you can give these guys a mulligan and say, you know what, they made the playoffs in 2 of their first 4 years. Kevin Stefanski was coach of the year twice. They showed they've got something that's pretty sturdy in 2023. It didn't work out the same way in 24, but that doesn't mean you should pull the plug on everything.
Let's fill in some blanks. Let's fill in some blanks.
Yeah.
Paul DePodesta wanted the Browns to hire Sean McDermott. Instead, they hired Hugh Jackson. They didn't listen to him. He wanted Kevin Stefanski the first time. They hired Freddie Kitchens. So this is sort of what you're dealing with. And yeah, Kyle Shanahan wanted out badly. So yeah, that is sort of the issue you are working with in there. And yeah, the setup they have is one is one that they wanted and liked because they kept doing this thing where they had this tug of war. And I already mentioned this, the political infighting that was problematic. But you're going to see, and this is what I keep running into nationally, Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry are highly, highly rated by people. And most people are laughing at the idea that the Browns would fire them because they know what the Browns are without them. And that is the thing I think Jimmy Haslam is aware of. I think Jimmy Haslam knows what that would mean. I also think Jimmy Haslam knows that if he fires anybody, then he's going to have to own the whole Deshaun Watson thing himself, and he doesn't want to do that. So there are a lot of reasons why I don't see anything changing, even though this season sucks, and even though you can see look at this. But as I talked about earlier, the messes you see around the league that are actual messes look infinitely worse than what's going on in Cleveland. The Browns are just losing, which sucks. But it doesn't at all look like a team that's just falling apart and, infighting and this, that, and the other. And we've seen seasons like that here all too often where you're, having these internal battles and it just becomes a giant clown operation. They aren't like that. It's unfortunate. It's, I totally sympathize with anybody who's frustrated with the season and losing, but it's nothing like we've seen from this team in the past. It's just not working out with the injuries, the quarterback situation, everything else. So yeah, it's very easy to turn around and go, yep, the Deshaun Watson thing was a complete disaster. We have to own that. And that's another reason I don't think Jimmy Haslam wants to fire them. And by the way, as I think about this, it's really smart that Andrew Berry did not do that in that press conference because it basically made sure that if it in some weird way, it is politically savvy on his part that he never has to, if Jimmy Haslam were to fire him, he'd never actually have to own that. Jimmy Haslam would. So there's this extra incentive for Jimmy Haslam to sort of not fire anybody because then they at least have to go and take that part of it and own the failure because if not, they have to do that. So no way you can. Nobody's bringing Watson back.
Yeah,
That part
Watson isn't
relevant.
playing it another down.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like this, I've there's gonna be another radio clip that sort of echoes the same thing.
Yeah.
I hear this on other even draft podcasts and stuff. They're sort of looking at the Browns situation and they're like, there's no way they can fire these guys because they know what this team is without them. So yeah, I think that's going to be a common threat. And as much as I understand why people are so mad, the Browns are not good at the mystery box. And all of this, if they were to fire them, you're going to hear arguments. Well, one of 32 jobs. Well, that's fine. But they're going to be basically the lowest rank of those 32 jobs, which is going to inherently limit your job opportunities. Yeah. For example, if the 49ers, and I'm not saying this will happen, I just happen to know a reporter who's constantly trying to make this happen. If the 49ers were to fire Kyle Shanahan, every person would want that job who's in the market to be a head coach. That is the difference between that or let's say the Browns were to fire Kevin Stefanski. I don't think Ben Johnson's going to have any interest in going to Cleveland, for just as an example. And that's the guy that most
What's the reporter's name?
Grant Cohn.
Grant Cohen? I saw him going off about.
Yes, he always wants to fire Kyle Shanahan. Anyway,
yeah.
But like that's the difference.
They're them or something.
Yeah, they're if the Steelers fired Mike Tomlin, there'd be any number of people killing themselves to get that job. That's the difference. The Browns do not have that as much as we all would like them to. Kevin Stefanski is trying to earn that. And the other problem you run into, regardless of what position you're trying to fire, if you get rid of those guys, you would be going to Jimmy Haslam, who just fired the most successful coach the Browns have had since Bill Belichick, and going, I've got to follow that. They fired that guy, and I've got to follow him. Like, it's a really bad setup for all involved, other than, hey, I'm going to get my check. But where's Freddie Kitchen coaching at right now? Where's Hugh? I think Hugh Jackson's a consultant with the miserable Raiders. Like, that's the other problem is most people who come here have just disappeared from relevance. Pat Shurmur's offensive coordinator at Colorado. Not that that's a bad job or that he's a bad guy. It's just he
worked his way back up to a head coaching gig, though.
And it worked out just as well. It went great. Go Giants. But yeah, I mean, like that's the problem. You are inherently limiting your options. You think you are convinced that because the Browns are an NFL team that all these people are going to want this job, and they don't. And we've seen this play out. We saw this play out with Chip Kelly. We saw this play out with just Ben Johnson last year with Washington. Guys are being more choosy with their jobs, and that would include Mike Vrabel. Like I don't see a world in where Mike Vrabel is going to go, yeah, those guys who just won 11 games twice in 4 years just got fired. That looks eerily similar to the situation I just got fired out of in Tennessee. I can't wait to sign up. No, he's going to try to get a better job. Like, that is a reality they're going to have to deal with.
I think the thing with Vrabel is as well, I think he wants both. I think he wants to be the GM and the coach. Just a thought.
Maybe. That would be really – see, this is one of those things where, like, that'd be a really interesting conversation to have with him and, like, the whole truth serum thing. Yeah. Given what he sort of observed of the Browns, does he like the model they have? And, part of me would think that's exactly – so, like, when he initially took the job, like, my theory of the case, and I'm still not sure this won't happen, is Mike Vrabel would go through this whole process. He wants to learn more about the analytics part. He wants to learn more about the quarterback evaluation part. There are things he wanted to get out of this situation. And it would not have shocked me at all if Mike Vrabel was to get a job with somebody else and take Glenn Cook with him, who's one of the assistant GMs, and just set up operations that way. But I'd be very curious to know, hey, Mike Vrabel, you've been in this setup with the Browns for a year. Is this what you like? Or is it to your point where maybe he wants total control? I don't know the answer to that, but that's he has a very interesting perspective to sort of look at from that standpoint.
All right, Chris, I've seen you ask this a couple times. I would still like to know why Chubb wasn't used in the fourth quarter. I believe they probably have him on a pitch count of some, right? I mean,
they said they were going to. They said they wanted to limit his workload because they were going to have to turn around and play Pittsburgh in 4 days.
In a couple days. Short week. Don't want to give him too much work. This isn't the year that you want to push him. He looked good. I thought he looked as good, Chris. I don't think he's regressed at all. I saw you mention that earlier. I thought he looked as good as he's looked on Sunday.
He is coming back from a major knee injury. Like you can't just go out there and go, hey, give him 25 carries. It's not realistic.
It is usually with these injuries, it's usually the season after the season that you see them start to return to form, although he has looked decent so far. The other thing I was going to say about the whole Stefanski Barry thing, Pete, is that I do think it is in the realm of possibilities that something happens. Listen, and I wrote about this. The thing that's scary, if you're like us, and I'm not saying you have to feel this way, but you're a fan. I like Stefanski as a coach, and I like Barry and what they have in place. I do think that if the Haslams are embarrassed enough, or Jimmy gets embarrassed enough, he becomes dangerous in his decision making, and he could make with Hard Knocks coming up, with home games against the Steelers like tomorrow night. If he gets embarrassed, he could make a rash decision. We've seen it before, and that's kind of something that you really, really want to avoid if you're anybody on the payroll.
The other thing with Nick Chubb is the Browns have been very smart in their usage of him over the course of his career. So in his entire career, he averages 15.9 attempts a game. That's part of the reason. Now, unfortunately, this knee injury happened. Why he looks so good, why he has looked so good so long, is they don't try to run him into the ground.
Has Jimmy's rash decisions been wrong, though?
Often.
Yeah. I feel like he's done a nice job taking a step back, but in the beginning, he was often wrong. Yes.
His rash decision to get rid of Albert Breer sort of hinted at it.
Yes.
He hinted at John Dorsey was hired to work with Sashi Brown. That never actually happened. That was what was supposed to happen. John Dorsey managed to work his way in and basically manipulate it so that as a rash decision, that they got rid of Sashi Brown, which was stupid. They also, rash decision would be trying to trade a second and third round pick for AJ McCarron.
Yeah. He says that Steve points out the coaches he has canned have been right.
I guess. I mean, by virtue of the fact that, the Browns have been bad, sure. But
yeah. I mean, we're talking, 25 years of, not being competitive. So, none of those coaches seemed like competent coaches either, at all.
Yeah.
So,
yes. Yeah. I mean, that's ultimately and that's the thing. He's got to restrain himself from messing up a good thing. And I think to this point, he realizes he's got a good thing going. Jimmy Haslam is always going to be at his best when Haslam is not the center of conversation, which since these guys have been here has largely been the case, other than when people try to insist that he does things like fire offensive coordinators or force coaching changes or force the quarterback on the field, all of which makes no sense. I mean, he could certainly put his thumb on the scale in some respects, but again, why would these people want to work here if he's doing all these things and making this a hellish place to work? They wouldn't, and they could get themselves fired and take all the money.
Yeah. And as far as the Watson thing, I feel like there's a shared responsibility there.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
through all of them. I feel like they all had to sign off on it. And so to some degree, they are all responsible.
I still believe that Jimmy Haslam got too competitive in the end. And that's how they ended up with the contract that they have. But, again, Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry have to eat the vast majority of the blame on that one. And, I make no bones about that. I've never been a believer that Jimmy Haslam's the one that dictated they were going to get this quarterback against their will. They have to eat that. That is there's no getting around that. But I still think even with that, if you're going to fire them for that, so be it. Reputation, all the damage, acquiring that person, yes. but it's unavoidable that Jimmy Haslam had to sign off on this thing, did his own investigation, and then agreed to pay him the contract that they did. So that's part of the reason I don't think Jimmy Haslam's interested in grading them on that.
Yep. All right. This is the second. This one is quite enjoyable. So this is Ross Tucker on the afternoon drive again with Nick Wilson and Jonathan Peterlin. Ross Tucker being asked about the mulligan, quote unquote mulligan, that Albert Breers talked about just the day prior.
Very many teams with losing records that have good culture. I mean, I don't know. Like, did it not seem like the Browns' culture was fantastic last year when even with the injuries to Chubb and Deshaun Watson, they still won all those games with Flacco and made the playoffs? I mean, that seemed like a really good and impressive culture to me a year ago. So did Stefanski this offseason, did he forget to take his culture pills?
No, I think
he forgot to take his culture pills, and now he doesn't. Like, I've done 2 Browns games this year. I think they do have a good culture. What about them says bad culture?
The miscommunications, throwing people under the bus. I would say some of the stuff that's starting to happen on social media.
What's the miscommunication? What's the throwing?
Miscommunication on defense that continue to happen, and then everybody goes, "Yeah, hey, we miscommunicated. We'll do better next week."
It's not culture.
And you think that's culture, as opposed to?
I would say, like, when you're failing to do like rudimentary football things, like for instance, early in the season, it was like a bunch of pretty ridiculous penalties that were happening constantly. Like, I think when it's ticky-tack penalties from professional football players, when there's a bare minimum of standard not being met, I would imagine that's a sign of culture.
All right, I say fire everybody. Fire everybody and go back to being the Browns that every couple of years just bring in new GM, new head coach. Go back to the cycle of failure when you actually have guys, the only guys that have actually proven that they can do it with this iteration of the Browns. Because I saw with my own 2 eyes the Browns win the playoff game in Pittsburgh against the Steelers. I saw the Browns make the playoffs last year with the backup quarterback. So, yeah, I mean, good luck. Good luck. Go for it. Get rid of Coach of the Year, 2-time Coach of the Year, proven commodity, and go get someone else.
Agreed, Britton. Yeah, so that is the ultimate fear here for me, Pete, is the that the decision does get made for whatever reason to get rid of them, and ultimately you end back in that cycle of every 2 years regime change, and that's a terrible, terrible cycle to be in that we lived through for 20 plus years as Cleveland Browns fans. So when you find some guys that know what they're doing, have had some success, I certainly think they deserve another year.
Yeah, look, you'd be firing Kevin Stefanski to hope you get a coach who's good enough to win Coach of the Year in the first year. Well, they have that guy. He's here. Like, this is the thing where you have to look at what they've actually been able to do. Like, you're going, I want to fire Kevin Stefanski. I want to find the Stephen vote for this organization. Well, you have him. You already got him. He's here. In the same way, Kenny Atkinson's doing a great job in his first year. No different. That is here. Now, the only question I had, let's start here. Who do you think is leading the league in penalties right now?
It's the Ravens, right?
It is the Ravens. Their culture is in shambles. I am very concerned about the Ravens' culture right now. So that's one of it. The other one I'm sure he has something in mind when Nick Wilson said that he throwing under the bus, because what immediately jumped to mind for me was when the Browns had 2 just massive coverage busts in a game. And then after the game, Denzel Ward goes, those are on me, like 100% on me. And then Juan Thornhill comes out and goes, no, it's not just on him. It's on me. It's on all of us. Like that's where I sort of get confused on this is the part I don't see. Like even in 2022, you had Myles Garrett, and I thought it was bad on his part, like throwing Joe Woods under the bus a little bit in public. I didn't. Yeah. I thought that was a bad look, even though any number of people were happy about it because they don't like Joe Woods. I don't see that here. I always see, hey, I've got to do better. We've got to do better. You know, it's not good enough, this, that, and the other. And it's all coming from, you know, the messaging is consistent. It starts with Kevin Stefanski. He does, if, you know, you've got what was Georgia's coach after the kid got caught sort of celebrating with the Ole Miss family members, and he said, "What an idiot." Like Kevin Stefanski doesn't do that. He could easily have done that with Jedrick Wills. He could have said, he's a moron for calling it a business decision. He's unprofessional. We're not going to have that, this, that, and the other. He doesn't do that. He's always going to have his guys' backs, and that they like, and to the extent of he'll say, you know, this poor choice of words, whatever. That's about as harsh as he's going to get. You're not going to get these type of things. He did, because if he was going to do that, he should have done it, you know, theoretically, when Myles Garrett did the whole helmet thing in Pittsburgh. He didn't do it then. He's not going to do it. You know, that's just not who he is. And that is the culture that I see trickling down into this organization, where the guys don't do that. It's always I, me, we, not him, you, or anyone else. Like that is where I get lost in this. And to Ross Tucker's point, I agree. This is the thing. Losing teams don't have good culture by virtue of they are losing. So everything's going to be up for nitpicking, up for criticism, all these other things. And that's how it goes. Losing sucks. You've seen it on Kevin Stefanski's face where he just looks like beleaguered at times after some of those games.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're bad enough after watching Deshaun Watson stink out the joint. I mean, he has to live with it. So, yeah, I mean, like, but that doesn't show me, like, all these people, like, he's so beaten down. And that's true, but I also see a guy who he is that desperate to be good. He is that desperate to get things fixed. And I see that trickling down. So if you're talking about what do I want to see from these guys, and this is the thing where, people go, well, I want the more emotional guy, or I want the other thing. Like, if you lose, no one cares how you react, because it will get tired no matter what you do. It gets tired with Kevin Stefanski. It got tired with Bill Belichick. It gets tired with emotional guys like Dan Campbell in his first year when they went 3-13 or whatever it was. People were very tired of his emotional act. When you win, no one cares. Like, that's the thing. So that's also why I don't love the whole analyzing body language in a losing team, because we're mad at Grant Delpit for not getting his eyes scratched out and celebrating a play he made, but we're mad at guys for being down on themselves. Like, ultimately, the common denominator is this: you're not happy they're losing. I understand losing sucks, but don't try to make it deeper than that. Losing sucks. Evaluate the play, not the sort of action, other than if they are doing something like getting personal fouls would be something where you go, oh, he's losing control. He's hurting his team. Grant Delpit did not hurt his team by sort of celebrating a play. And to me, I've always looked at, like, on defense in particular, defensive players are playing to lose as slowly as possible. So you have to have some of that energy, because, like, otherwise you get beat and suddenly your guys are hanging their head the whole time. Like, that's not what you want. So, but I 100% agree with Ross Tucker in the sense that, like, you do not want to get back in the mystery box. You don't want to do it. And I would say the same thing to the Bengals. I again, retroactively, I'm saying the same thing about the Titans. Like, there are clearly coaches who cannot coach in the NFL, and there are times you can pick them out. But there are a lot of people who get given up on too early, in the same way that teams give up on quarterbacks too early, give up on all these other things. But it is way too fast. And the problem is, like, 17 games is a lot. And when you are in a losing season, what tends to happen is that, like, you every loss then compounds on itself. So if the Browns, even if the Browns win tomorrow, let's say the Browns beat the Steelers, but then they lose, like, the next game, and then the next game after that, like, the win is quickly forgotten. The losses just pound and pound and pound. They compound to the point where, like, you get to the end of the season and you're so sick of these people that you just want them fired. If you were just to give it a week or something, or take some time away from it, you probably wouldn't feel that way. That is where I think people get themselves in trouble. In the same way that, like, there were people who were pissed at the Cavs for losing to the Celtics by 3 points when they were 15-0, like suggesting that was the end of the season. Some of this is just the nature of sports and how we operate. But like, you got to sort of take the moment to sober up, be it literally or figuratively, and go take an honest look at this as opposed to just operating while mad.
I just wanted to hit this real quick. We got another video here I want to get to real quick, but King of all blunders, honestly, the only hope as Browns fans we have is to get lucky and find a quarterback. So this is kind of why, like, I agree with you. Finding a quarterback is a very difficult proposition. But it typically, with the exception of Deshaun Watson, has been easier to find success with Kevin Stefanski and an average quarterback. He has been able to find success, be competitive, whereas in my lifetime as a Browns fan, nobody else has really provided that, right? You had to have terrific quarterback play from Derek Anderson for one season, right? Or whatever. I'm just saying, you get the point though, right? Like, it doesn't take a miracle worker with Kevin. You just need a competent guy. So you don't need to get as lucky with him, which is kind of why, really more than anything, I believe in him and want him to remain the coach. I just wanted to point that out.
If that's the approach you have, then that is the entire lens you should view your head coaching hire in. Can he get the most out of the quarterback position? And that's a huge part of this. That's also why Vrabel, one of the reasons he got fired. Ultimately, I would have said, listen, figure it out, like, get better. But he struggled with that position. Ryan Tannehill was able to sort of have some pretty good years when they had Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator, but like, no one got better. Ryan Tannehill was the peak of quarterbacking, and you see Malik Willis immediately goes to Green Bay and they find success. Like Kevin Stefanski, and you can look at this and look, maybe Joe Flacco, if he was to continue playing, would sort of right himself. But it's interesting that Joe Flacco goes to Indianapolis and then gets 2 starts and he turns back into a pumpkin. Jameis Winston, who was has pretty good numbers as a backup with the Saints, but he goes to Cleveland and suddenly he can put up 200-300-yard games in a couple weeks span. And yes, there were a lot of volatility in that Ravens game where he tried to throw the game away, but against the Saints, like, there are people who are like trying to poo-poo the idea that he threw 395 yards because of just Joe Woods' defense. Like, that was 3 games for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah,
that was, you're like, come on, man. Like, and that's the thing that sort of hurts Kevin Stefanski. Deshaun Watson was so bad, but every quarterback not named Deshaun Watson has gotten better here with Kevin Stefanski. You saw quarterbacks want to sign here because they want to work with Kevin Stefanski. We saw that with Tyler Huntley this past year. I think that's going to be a factor in the offseason. I think there are going to be quarterbacks who want to come to Cleveland for that reason. Now, is it going to be a franchise quarterback? No, it's not, because you don't get those guys to walk. But it is a reason why you should be very interested in staying with a guy who can do that. And then on the other hand, he was able to hire a defensive coordinator who got you a historic defense. And granted, it's not as good as it was last year. It's still pretty good, Saints game notwithstanding. So if he can hire the right people to do the other things and he can get the quarterback right, figure it out, stick with it, make it work. And that's, to me, where you have to go with this thing, because I agree with the point that you have to get the quarterback right. If the Browns had Joe Burrow, assuming he could stay in one piece, they are a Super Bowl contender. If they had a franchise quarterback with Kevin Stefanski, I don't think anybody would sit here and say to themselves that if you were to take a great quarterback off another team, that he wouldn't be great with Kevin Stefanski. The Deshaun Watson situation is unique in that he had not played in so long, and he has not shown the ability to evolve. Whatever. But like, Kevin Stefanski has been able to show you that he can get the best out of the quarterback. He's been able to show you he can hire good assistants, and assistants want to come to Cleveland. This is another key element. This is something else the Browns have struggled with in past regimes, is they've struggled to get guys who want to be here. And Tom Pelissero listed wrote out his, young coaches to keep an eye on. like for future job slots. And there is an element to this where I think they just throw that list of guys that were invited to the one summit. And there's some of these other guys, but like the Browns don't have guys on that list ever. They've got like 4 of them on there with Ephraim Banda, the cornerbacks coach, Brandon Lynch, who was at that summit. Tommy Reese is a guy people are keeping an eye on. And I've said this before, the Browns really, really like Tommy Reese. Like they have guys that people want to get. And there is an inherent volatility to this. So one of the things I would point out with this is like Bobby Sloak was the guy. Well, other than Ben Johnson, but at the end of the years, Bobby Sloak was the guy everybody wanted. Oh man, I can't wait to get a chance to get Bobby Sloak. And now this year, I still think he's a hell of a coordinator, but you're hearing a lot more getting too cute, not as good as they were last year. You know, all these problems. Like there's an element of that where that's just
killing
the NFL.
him. Yeah. He's under fire in Houston like crazy. So yeah, it's crazy how quickly that can change. All right, you're watching the React. Let's get to one more video. It's the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. This is for a little comic relief here. This is after the game the other day. Jay, all-time Jay.
Guys, we are going to talk Browns real quick, and then we're going to hop back to the Cavs. And if you want to tackle NFL action, you can use FanDuel, America's #1 sport. Both start us off. Your shotgun reaction to the Browns getting embarrassed by the Saints in New Orleans, falling to 2-8 on the season.
So, man, there's so much to say about this. The organization it's disaster from top to bottom right now. I mean, think about it this year. The Saints are a terrible team. You've played now 5 games against other terrible teams, and you're 1-4 against the other teams like you that stink. 1-4. Their only win against their other bad teams they've played is Jacksonville. The rest of their schedule, you're playing teams that are all pretty good.
I just don't get this debate, Pete. We know they're not a good team this year.
I think that case is settled. I think
right.
Yeah.
Like we know that. So why we continue to act like we're surprised when we don't get tremendous performance?
This is what I just talked about. Like we let bad compound itself to a point that makes no sense. Like the jury's out. They're bad. So they're going to be bad. Now, hopefully they win. Like, because going to the Ravens game, nobody expected the Browns to win that game. Everybody thought, oh, this could be ugly. This could be bad. And they won. And it's already quickly forgotten because they've gotten back to losing. But like, yeah, the jury is out. The Browns are bad this year. To the degree of bad, like to me, and I know this is not popular with people, but like to me, the NFL is make playoffs or don't make playoffs. The rest is immaterial to me. Like, and the Browns are fortunate that the fact that they are as bad as they are, they at least have their draft picks. But like the reason I say that it's either playoffs or not playoffs is because every year 6 teams make the playoffs that didn't the year before, and 6 teams that made the playoffs don't. And you see teams go from top of the division to the bottom of the division in back again in a 1-year span. Like it is that difficult because of injuries and everything else, changing rosters. This is what Roger Goodell and the NFL owners want, to get this perfect parity set up. Well, they've got it. And unfortunately, you sit there and go, well, the Browns aren't really part of that. Well, unfortunately, they play in a division with the Ravens and the Steelers who insist on never sucking. And like when you're looking at some of these coaches you want, let's use Mike Vrabel as an example. Mike Vrabel led the Titans to a division championship in 2020. They won 11 games. The same year the Browns won 11 games. When the Browns won 11 games, the Pittsburgh Steelers won 12 and the Ravens won 11. When Mike Vrabel did it, the bottom 2 teams, which I believe are the Texans and the Jaguars, combined for 5 wins. 2021, they went 12-4 and they won the division, which is the Browns have not reached 12 games. So they did better. But the bottom 2 teams in the division, Texans and Jags, combined for 7 wins. When the Browns went this past year in 2023 and they won 11 games, every team in the division had a winning record. Like there's some element where you're just like, this is bullshit that the Browns continue to be in this division where everybody insists on being good. It's the difference between playing in the SEC versus the ACC. Like you are just at an inherent disadvantage, and you sort of have to accept the reality that it's just going to be a slog every year. It's going to be a battle. And maybe the Bengals will fall apart because they have a tendency to do that because they're cheap. But right now, the Steelers and Ravens insist on never dying and never really taking a true fall off. Like the worst I think the Ravens have done is gotten to 7 wins one year. The Steelers have not had a losing record in however long. That is the reality you live in, and you have to be able to deal with that. You also sort of, when you're comparing it to other people, you have to grade it against that sort of curve.
Yeah. Yep.
Cincinnati's been their offense stinks, and they're not playing. They're not very good. Miami's but they've been better with Tua. Besides that, you got Pittsburgh twice. You got Baltimore again.
What's the easiest game they have left?
I guess the Dolphins
Bengals.
at home.
They always beat the Bengals.
They didn't earlier in the year.
Just messing with you.
No, at this point, I don't really care.
You know what? It probably is Miami or Cincinnati.
It's Miami at home and Cincinnati on the road. I mean, and they're going to be underdogs in both those games. Maybe they're a slight favorite against Miami at home, but I doubt it.
Doubt it too.
This organization stinks. You've talked about it for the bad soil. Jimmy Haslam is a disaster. He is an absolutely hideous owner in every way. The front office stinks. The fact that they can't even tell you what Paul DePodesta's job is. They're cagey about what his job is. That's insane to me. Andrew Berry, it's been a disaster. Almost everything he's done has been bad. Everything points back to Watson. We got all the. There's a group of people out there driving me crazy. They're like, I told you it wasn't just Watson. First of all, nobody ever says it's just one thing. But ultimately, the Watson trade is the biggest culprit in all this disaster because first of all, you acquired the worst quarterback in the league. And you had to give up 5 draft picks, I think it was, including 3 first-rounders. So where would this team be? We'll never know, even though it's irrelevant, but it has ultimately crushed the team. Jameis Winston, I thought, played pretty well, as I expected him to. They didn't score enough. Part of that is because the kicker, who had one good year, and then you decided to pay him, he'd been a mediocre kicker his whole career. He had one good year. The Browns, we got to extend the kicker. And now he stinks again. He missed, chip shot field goal after chip shot field goal. This defense is supposed to be so good. 35 points. They made Taysom Hill look like Michael Vick. Are you kidding me? Taysom Hill. The Browns defense played this game as if they'd never seen a gadget play ever in their life. It was almost like they weren't aware that you were allowed to do these things that New Orleans did. Ultimately, Kevin Stefanski and everybody else on this team is going to be fired. I think Kevin Stefanski is an okay coach. I have defended him to no end. But I got to say, and I saw Ben Axelrod, and I don't mean to kill him for this, and I've seen a lot of other people. I've heard Jason say this. I've probably said it myself. I think I have. If Stefanski gets fired, he's going to get picked up right away. Yeah, I don't buy that. The Coach of the Year award is a fraud. Everybody in the league knows that it's a fraud. It doesn't mean you're the best coach. You just had a surprise good season. Andy Reid's the Coach of the Year every year. Kevin Stefanski wasn't the best coach in the NFL last year.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. Who cares about the award, right? The award is kind of good to bad, good to bad, bad to good, right? Or bad to good, but regardless of that, he's still taking you to the playoffs twice in his first 4 years as the coach. That trumps any award given.
Coach of the Year award matters for one reason. There are only 13 coaches who have ever done it twice. Say what you will, but again, you have to consider the Browns' handicap in this circumstance. And the coaching job the Browns did last year was phenomenal, given
remarkable
the amount of issues they had. And yes, you could have given Bill Belichick any number of coaches of the year, but on some level, you can also make the case that it's really easy when you have Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady. Not to say that winning is really difficult. I'm never there to say that, but I understand what he's saying. I agree with him to that point. But two-time Coach of the Year does matter. There are very few, so it's relevant. If your attitude is the owner sucks and it's never going to work, well then you don't need to cover it every day. You can just move on and sort of do your thing. But I would also point out that Jim Irsay is not a good owner. They've won the Super Bowl. They had Peyton Manning. There have been a number of bad owners that have had a ton of success, and the Browns have the potential to be one of them. They just don't have the the staying power that these other teams have had. They have not proven that. They have to prove that. But like to say, Kevin Stefanski would absolutely be hired. I cannot state this enough. There are teams that would be killing themselves to get Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry. They just hire them both, redo it, and make the Browns. Their fan bases, media, whatever, are going to lead with, he got the Browns to the playoff twice and won a playoff game for a team that had not won a playoff game since 1994. The Browns have been an abject disaster for over a quarter of a century, and they made it work. That will get them a ton of praise. And again, I keep mentioning this. It will put more of the spotlight on Jimmy Haslam, which he does not want. It would be, you talk about he doesn't want to be embarrassed. He knows what will happen if he fires these people and how it will look. He will continue to be that guy. You'll have to make another hire that he's never really gotten right. Lucked into this one. So, and a lot of these people were pushed. A lot of the people that I hear from that are trying to fire him or get Vrabel in there were the same people who wanted Josh McDaniels, who is one of the worst coaches in NFL history, and wanted to give him the keys to the whole franchise in doing it. So, like, that's where I just get lost in this whole thing. And granted, I understand of anyone's frustration, but this is where you have to take a step away and go, yeah, it's really bad that it sucks that they're having a bad year. But here again, it's either make the playoffs or don't. The degrees thing to me is ultimately irrelevant. I actually, I continue to say this. I will defend Bull on a lot of things because I think he's usually incredibly reasonable and is usually shouted down by people who are unreasonable. But I think and who knows? And given he might be caught up in the moment and have changed his tune. I don't know. But like, this is where I think you let losses compound and you're going, well, they've lost this many games. So this one is so much worse because they've lost these games. Or this one's, they've gotten embarrassed so much that like the Saints loss is one loss. They can't lose multiple games to the Saints unless they let that game linger into the next game. So like, just like the Ravens game doesn't save their season. And if they beat the Steelers tomorrow, it doesn't save their season. They're still going to be a bad football team, but I'd rather they win than lose.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're getting there, Steven.
He did a good job. Who knows? But right now,
the issue to me isn't the fact that they quit. The issue is that they thought as an organization they were past all of this crap, and they're not. Yeah. And that's more disheartening than a team that quit. Because if you quit, you can get rid of the guys that quit and you move on. It's not that big of a deal. This is deeper than that. And that's what's so disheartening is they thought they were past this level of dysfunction, toxicity, whatever word you want to use. They thought that they had the right people in place, and they thought that as an organization, ownership learned their lessons from this. They've moved past all of that, and they haven't. We're right back where they've always been. They're 2-8. You're right. It does feel hopeless because of the quarterback situation, because of the cap sheet moving forward. There's just not a lot of reason for hope. So I just don't have a lot to say about them. I just don't care.
One of the worst things when I said at the time, one of the worst things that could have happened to the Cleveland Browns was Deshaun Watson getting hurt in the middle of the season, very early in the season. You say, what are you talking about, G. Bush? Why was that? We were excited about that. We got to see other. Well, no, because now when Deshaun Watson is taken off the board, there is a hardcore evaluation of every other aspect of your organization. So when Deshaun Watson got moved away, now people, after a while, after 1 or 2 weeks, they'll say, well, all right, cool, we'll watch the games. And now all of a sudden you got 9, 6, 7, 8, 9 games left to go. And now you can't run from those games. You can't, you have to look and call a thing what it is. Not only is your quarterback not good, maybe your coaching staff wasn't good. Maybe your talent.
The plan was Deshaun Watson. So by him failing, like, this is ultimately, especially 8 games in, it's already a failure.
Yeah, this logic falls apart immediately when you're sitting there. You were going through it every week. Why are they not benching this man? Like, you think that would have gone better if he was still on the field all this time?
Yeah. What?
Not even close. And you got to see, as I've said, like Deshaun Watson, when he was in there, it looked like the Browns had 8 players on offense. Like, there are no receivers. There's some linemen and maybe a tight end and a running back. Now you could say what you want, but like a whole bunch of people are catching the ball. Like in here, people got mad at me for saying it, writing it. I had fun watching the offense on Sunday. I had miserable time watching the defense, especially. I had fun watching Jameis Winston throw the ball all over the park and guys catching it and making plays. Jerry Jeudy catching the touchdown, 89 yards, fun. Toe tapping Elijah Moore for 30 yards, fun. Cedric Tillman getting that block to get Jeudy in the end zone, fun. David Njoku, easy 89 yards. That's fun to me. Like, these are things I can sit there and watch and go, yeah, man, this sucks. But at least I get to see guys get to do stuff and not just sit there and be miserable and have the life sucked out of them slowly over the course of the season. Like, there are things you can build on with that. And you're sitting there going, they evaluate everybody. You're absolutely right. They're going to evaluate everybody, including Cedric Tillman and Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore and David Njoku and Jack Conklin and Isaiah McGuire and Mahmoud Diabate and all these guys who are doing good things on a losing team. And they can sit there and go, yeah, we've got some stuff. You cannot, like, I would love for them to be able to magically heal JOK and have him back on the field heading to an all-pro season. I would love Myles Garrett's feet to magically heal themselves. I would love all these things. I would love the 3 tackles they're missing to be healthy. I would love them to have both centers they lost healthy. I would love Joel Bitonio to be Joel Bitonio again and Nick Chubb to be Nick Chubb again. Like, there are so many things you can point to and go, man, that sucks. But it is what it is. And the NFL is not going to feel sorry for them. And they're going to have to play these games. And that's sort of where they're at. But that's also why you can sit there and point to and go, look at all these things that have sucked. A lot of them will sort of either be in a position where they can move on, Deshaun Watson being the easiest one. You're gone. You know, the cap hits and all that, fine, manageable, but shitty. But you at least get to move on. Like, we have our answer on Deshaun Watson. It's over. So you sit there and go, there's no hope. It's not a great scenario, but I have hope that they can. I know it's not Deshaun Watson, so I have hope that they can at least find somebody else. I have young players where I'm sitting here watching that can play, and they're developing and getting better. Like, those are things I can hang my hat on and go, okay, these are good things in spite of a bad season. Like, this is the thing. Again, you talk about, well, where's the culture? Well, the culture is that all these young guys who are working and getting better, who understand that NFL is not for long, and if I don't try, I could be out of the league real fast. Welcome to it. So, like, again, in the heat of the moment, I understand why they feel this way. I have made my peace with this season long ago. I made my peace with Deshaun Watson even longer ago. So I'm past this crap. And, like, again, the jury's out. They're bad. How mad do you want me to be that they're bad? They're bad. Yeah. Like, I can process that and go, yeah, they're bad. So what's going to happen here? How do they get better from here? Well, all those things I talked about.
Pathetical. But here's what Jimmy Haslam is saying as he hears it. He's laughing.
Right.
That's never going to happen, G.
Can't happen. I got the game rigged.
There's no way the NFL is going to put a second team here because there's something in our soil. So he is operating under the following premise. We're suckers. We're stupid. I can kick them right between the legs. They're going to come back next Sunday and say, thank you, sir, may I have another. That's what we've done. So I've done it for 50 years. Thank you, sir, may I have another. Bull sent out a text. I think I saw it on our text chain. And I was like, Jesus, that can't be right. The Cavaliers have won more games in a month than the Browns have won playoff games ever.
Not ever, 75 years.
Okay, 75 years.
Yeah.
Ever.
They've won 17 ever. But in the last 75 years, they've won 14.
And by the end of this week, the Cavs will have won more games in the first month of the NBA season than the Browns have won playoff games ever.
Yeah.
How many playoff wins do the Steelers have?
They have 36.
Gee, Chris.
It's nuts, man. It's nuts. And
that's
so Jimmy is a
bad
smart
comparison. Just because
I keep hearing this defense of Jimmy. Hey, he spends money. Hey, he
like the
spends
Steelers
money.
are one of the most successful organizations in the league.
What if you spent $5 million for a shed that had no roof? What then do you say about the person that spends money? You say, wow, he's burning cash. This is the same man that was paying 5 head coaches at one time because his decision making is so poor that he kept firing them, hiring new ones, firing them, and he had 5 on payroll at one time. He spends money. I'll give him that. I wish the Guardians owner had his wallet. We'd have a dynasty. But that's not going to happen. And so he's so banking on us showing up next Sunday saying, "Thank you, sir, may I have another?" that he's going to spend $200 million of his own money, $300 million of his own money to build Browns World.
No more than that.
Out in Brook Park. I mean, who knows? I think he would like to get by only spending $300 million, may end up spending $500 million. But here's what that is. He's making an investment. What is that investment? His investment is no matter how much we suck, they're going to come. They're going to buy our silly jerseys that will be obsolete in 2 years. They're going to come and pay for our beer, and they're going to pay for parking, and they're going to pay for tailgating licenses. And now I'm going to get all of the money because I own it all. So Jimmy is making a calculated guess. No matter how much they suck, we'll be there. It's not a dumb bet because we've been there. And so he's basically saying, I'm getting rich on our misery. Think about that for a second. This man is by the way, how are the Milwaukee Bucks doing since he became owner?
Sabotage them.
Come on.
Done.
It's kind of wild.
We were talking dynasty about this team, weren't we? Dynasty. What has happened to that team? I think the last check,
I
I
don't
think
know
they're
what
4-9.
circles he talks about dynasty. And Milwaukee
Everything he
Bucks,
touches
but-
turns to shit. That's it. And you know, I've actually had people say to me, "Wow, Jay, you've got a sharp sword for this dude." It's our job. It's our job. If he was doing wonderful things, I would say wonderful things about him. But he's not, and I can't sit back and watch it. And I am glad to see this. I feel like the pendulum is swinging because I've been saying it for 5 years. Once I started hearing it from my colleagues at ESPN, when they were really telling me what is going on, I listened. Now, I can't unplug my fandom. I still sit down at 1 o'clock on Sunday and I say, let's go. But I'm not giving them dollars. Have it a long time, I won't. But I can't divorce myself from the orange and the brown, from the colors. Jimmy Haslam isn't the Browns. He is now. He's the guardian of them now. But I feel like the pendulum is swinging. I talked earlier about week 4 or 5 this year. I said, guys, I've never felt fan apathy where it is now. This is different. This is new to me. I'm feeling fans. I heard them yesterday say,
no, they checked out.
They're done.
I do all. Listen, people say they going.
But
they talking to their people. No, I really feel like there is a vacuum of Browns
It's
fans
starting.
that is like, nah, I'm for real this time.
I hear, but they'll be back next year.
We'll be sucked back in.
They'll be back.
When we take whoever with the number 2 pick in the NFL draft,
Yeah.
we're going to be sucked right back in. I'll end it by saying this. How many times have we said, is it Baker or is it OBJ? Is it Joe Flacco or is it whoever? Fill in the blanks. How many times have we asked that question? When are we going to start asking the real question? Why won't this man sell the team? Until fans start
All right, that's enough. That is so absurd.
Okay, so let's start here. He's gonna put 1.2 to 1.3 billion. I think he should put all of it, but nevertheless, to say he's trying to pay 300 million for the stadium is ludicrous. He wants to make a substantial investment. I hate to point out the obvious, but the Browns would make money even if no one showed up in the stadium. Like this, and this is how Mike Brown has been able to consistently exist. The NFL owning an NFL team is a license to print money. So yeah, you can make the argument that anyone owning an NFL team is going to make money. And you're right. I mean, Daniel Snyder did everything he could to alienate the entirety of the Washington, one of the biggest fan bases in the NFL. And they still made money hand over fist. So like this idea that like he looks at them as suckers is stupid. I think Jimmy Haslam desperately wants to win. I think in a lot of ways he's really bad at it for all the reasons I've laid out in terms of the coaching stuff and stuff of that nature. But like we blame, if you want to blame him for everything, so be it. But they have a good coach and good GM in place. To me, people will disagree. Fine, let them do it. That's it. Just get out of the way and let them do it. It's a bad season. It will go by. But like some of the stuff he talks about just is an insane element to me, because like I've seen fan apathy long before this. You're going to tell me that people weren't apathetic when the Browns, people forget, like the people assume that the Browns tanked for 2 years. They didn't. They tanked for 1.
Yeah.
Hugh Jackson tanked them for the second year because he was so colossally bad at football. I remember how many people were pissed that year and done with it because Hugh Jackson was so bad. And then they were apathetic because Hugh Jackson was back again after that. So like I've seen it, and the Browns were long before that. I've seen fan apathy. The idea that it's new is silly, but yes, they will ultimately give the Browns a shot because that comes down to the fact that Northeast Ohio and Ohio in general, and the U.S. entirely, is a football obsessed country. Now, the risky run is that you put yourself more in a fantasy football world as opposed to following a team and wanting season tickets and those type of things and being a true fan of one team. You could be with there are a lot of Red Zone fans who just love the game and watch it on Red Zone, which is also distorting things to me in a lot of ways. That's a whole another thing where like people watch Red Zone and assume all these teams are really competent and they don't watch the rest of the game where they are not. But like Jimmy Haslam has a lot of blame to own since in his stewardship of the Browns. There's no getting around that. But like if he, let's put it this way, where my apathy would come from is if he fires this group. I would be apathetic if he fires this group.
Yeah.
And I think there will be a lot of people who are in that camp. But to the point of like where the apathy is coming from, it's almost entirely from Deshaun Watson. It's not Jimmy Haslam in the sense he signed off on him. It's Deshaun Watson based. It's interesting for me to listen to talking heads who pushed and defended and wanted every bit of Deshaun Watson to then sit there and go, the owner's fault. It's the owner's fault. I have nothing to do with it. Even though I pushed for this, I wanted this. I thought he was going to be the greatest thing. I played his fake lawyer for a whole lot of the time. I defended all the accusations the entire way. I thought he was going to be great, the greatest thing ever. I went to buy cheesesteaks at his freaking restaurant, but no, it's the owner's fault. Like the amount of people who obfuscate the stuff they say and just move on to the next one is galling to me. Just like you got to own it. Like if you want all these other people to own it, you got to own it. And I don't see that from these people. So look, and the other thing is I would be very shocked. Even last year, I thought, Jay is somebody who just hates Jimmy Haslam. Even when they were winning, he just doesn't like Jimmy Haslam. Like, which is I'm not saying he has to. Like, that's fine. I completely understand it. But like, he does allow it to get to a point where like it's insane. So look, I'm really excited for the idea that ultimate Cleveland sport. I guess we can't do it anymore because they're not going to cover the Browns anymore. So that's a loss for us. That's a loss for me. We can't talk about any more clips from the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show because they don't care and they're going to give up on the Browns. Okay.
The thing about I'll say one thing about Jimmy. At least he wants to win. I mean, you can act like he's treating everybody like suckers, but he wants to win.
That's why he tried to go to the fax machine and the second and third round pick for AJ McCarron, like one of the most preposterous ideas ever. But he wants to win. That's the problem.
Yes.
He's so committed to winning in so many ways that like that gets in the way. The biggest problem I have with Jimmy Haslam is he acts like a fan too much.
Yeah.
He's got to be an owner. Can't be a fan, and that has been tough for him. And I think he's finally starting to. We'll see. I mean, this is going to be a big test for him, depending on just where this season ends up. But he's got to try not to be a fan. and try not to be embarrassed and sort of effectively, his variation of turning the TV off on this regime or whatever and understanding what it is. We'll see. But I'm pretty confident the Browns are going to retain the group. The thing that people need to divorce themselves of is the idea that one of them could get fired. There's no shot. They will both go if one of them goes. So if you're sitting there going, man, I hope just Andrew Berry goes, Kevin Stefanski's going with him, and you're going to be moving on from both of them. They are effectively married. I don't see a world in which one is going.
It would be surprising for sure. Yes, Chris, we will be on tomorrow night. Excuse me, 7 p.m. for All Eyes on Cleveland / pregame show. Pete, you're welcome if you would like to join. And everybody's welcome. So we will have an hour lead up of what normally is All Eyes on Cleveland, but leads you right into the game, and we will have post-game coverage. Please go over to the OBR.com, register, and get yourself a chance to win a VIP subscription at the website. Yeah, the work that's done behind the paywall is fantastic. The forums, all of that stuff is a blast, and we want you to get a chance to see what that's like. So go over there and enter yourself. Takes a couple of seconds to do. Just follow the instructions. That's right on the front page at theobr.com for a chance for a free VIP subscription for a year, right? An entire year. Is that right? Yes.
I believe so.
Yeah. For the entire year. So very cool thing that we are doing, showing appreciation to you. We thank you so much for your participation in the show. And we're going to get out of here. Long one tonight. Good stuff. As always, from Pete. Any parting words, sir?
Just beyond signing up for the website to get involved in that stuff, the newsletter is an easy way to get everything from us. So always do that. Subscribe to the podcast. Obviously, this would be on it, but there's obviously we have a show every day during the week. There's a lot of good there are a lot of good stuff to listen to. A lot of different viewpoints. Stuff that disagrees with me. Yeah, the other thing I would point out. So, like I said, I wrote an article about how I'm evaluating quarterbacks. I would highly recommend certainly read that. But I would also highly recommend the one that Jacob and Sam Penix are doing their various tiers. They've done the first and second tier. So coming soon, there will be a third tier. Because look, we're going to be. This is where we're at. We're going to be discussing quarterbacks. We're going to be discussing the draft. So get a head start on getting familiar with who matters on that front.
The process starts early this year, unfortunately. So
indeed.
All right. We will see you tomorrow night for Thursday night football. It's still the Steelers and the Browns, baby. Let's go. So we'll see you then. And for Pete Smith and everybody at the OBR, my name is Brad Ward. Thanks for watching The React. We are